Welcome to the VBAC Home Birth Stories podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Winning, founder of the Motherhood Circle and creator of the Journey into Motherhood program. I'm a mother of three and have had two unplanned and unneeded C-sections and had a calm and positive vaginal home birth, Freebirth, with our third baby who is 4.5 kilos or 10 pounds. My own journey has sparked a deep passion to support women to find their strength and support to create the pregnancy, birth and postpartum you desire and deserve. This podcast is for women wanting to learn more about VBACs, especially home births, and professionals who want to learn more about how to support home birthing women. Inside, we're going to hear from women sharing their stories from surgical birth to achieving their vaginal home birth after cesarean, as well as expert interviews so that you have a mix of inspiring stories as well as powerful knowledge. I hope you enjoy this podcast. Hello and welcome to another episode on the VBAC Home Birth Stories podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Winning, and today I have our first dad on the podcast who I'm really excited to bring to you today and hear his story and his side of events. I know we've had a few dads who have listened to the podcast, but I think it's also nice to hear the partner's take on the journey. And when I was talking with Sarah in one of our latest episodes, please check it out if you haven't heard it yet, she offered that Ben could come on and be a guest. And I was really excited about that because there was so much that happened in that story. First of all, I would like to welcome Ben and get Ben to do a little bit of an introduction, whatever you would like to share about yourself. And then I want to go have a little bit of an overview, and then Ben can share where he started in his journey with the pregnancies. So welcome, Ben.
Hello.
Hello.
Thanks for having me, Ashley. Firstly, we've got 4 children now. The first 3 were born via Cesarean, and their latest one was free birth. So quite an interesting story that Sarah has shared in the past.
It is, and you're down in Victoria as well. I won't say location-wise, but yeah, you're down in Victoria.
Yeah, regional Victoria, that's correct.
Awesome. Well, welcome. So thank you for coming on the show and being our first dad to share his story and view of what happened. I'm going to give a little bit of an overview here just so that we can recap on what Sarah shared with us. Now, this is only a really short recap. If you would like to listen to the full story, it's a long one, but a really good one and a very popular one. Episode number 40, Sarah, epic birth, healing, free birth after 3 surgical births, long births and small gaps between births. In this episode, we meet Sarah, mother of 4 with 3 boys and a little girl. She joined us to share her amazing story just 2 weeks shy into her postpartum, and she was feeling absolutely amazing. She lives in rural country Victoria and grew up in a big Dutch family, and they were very trusting of the medical system as well. Sarah had a miscarriage with her first pregnancy, which required a D&C in hospital. She fell pregnant soon after. Sarah tells a very complex and interesting story that is long, but very interesting and full of insights and wisdom. Here's an overview of what happened. Sarah had a private midwife during her first pregnancy and was booked into a birth house. Her waters broke around 41+6, and she eventually ended up in hospital due to length of labour and the waters being broken. She had Pitocin and a painful labour with a shift change and a horrible midwife. She ended up in surgery and her baby was born. Second pregnancy was around 3 to 4 months postpartum. She was pregnant again. She was in a VBAC clinic and felt supported in pregnancy, but had a bit of a bait and switch around 38 weeks, which ended in a visit from CPS at 41 weeks. She felt unheard during labour, telling the health support something was wrong with her baby, and eventually, after an MET call was made after the birth, ended up in a special care for a week with sepsis. Sarah ended up having another surgical birth with that birth. Third birth, she hired a doula and who had a VBAC, and she felt supported through her pregnancy, and she planned a home birth with that doula. She couldn't get her head into the game of being in labour when her contractions came so hard and fast. Sarah feels she handed over her power to the doula, who made little comments throughout her labour about her positioning of the baby, and she felt she needed someone who was going to support her and keep her going and not put doubt into her mind. And she transferred and had a surgical birth with that baby. Baby number 4, Sarah fell pregnant around 9 months postpartum, and she decided she wanted to have a C-section with this baby. She did not want to fight the system and just wanted to have an easy C-section, just get over and done with. She went and saw Birth Time, the movie, and she decided from then on she was going to have a free birth. She didn't want any support people around her, just her husband, Ben, and she wanted to be really trusting of the process. She didn't want to give any of her power away. And I'm not going to share any more. She went on to have her epic free birth after 3 cesareans. And I guess we'll hand it over to Ben now, just to, that was a lot to kind of read out there, Ben. How are you feeling after I read all that out? Was bringing back some memories?
Certainly was, yeah, absolutely. And you've done a great job summarising.
Oh, good.
in a short space of time.
Thank you. Awesome. Well, let's get started. Normally I, would start from conception and that, but let's start off in the pregnancy wherever you feel comfortable. We can start off with your very first pregnancy that ended in a miscarriage, if you would like. I'm happy for you to start off your journey wherever you are, because the partners and men will be listening to this as well. So any insights and any tips you can offer the men to kind of get through any of these situations, and that would be really helpful for them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So with our first pregnancy, or with my wife's first pregnancy, be mindful of what I say, which ended up in a miscarriage. Unfortunately, the experience was quite emotional, obviously. So we were told that Sarah was infertile, which is what led into that situation, and then we fell pregnant, which was incredible, but unfortunately miscarried. In this stage, we planned our life, or started thinking about life without children, and we just started basically doing a renovation, and we'd planned for a large house. So it was very raw and very emotional at the time, but Sarah, being the strong woman that she is, said, well, how about I change up what I'm doing? So getting off the pill and starting to trust her body and remove the medication that was, I guess, essentially not meant to be there if we go back centuries ago. And then we fell pregnant again with our first. Just a beautiful story, to be honest. It was like that miracle child that came along. Pregnancy was really good. Sarah was going really well, handling really well, and then she has, interestingly, now that we reflect back, that she actually rolled her ankle 41 weeks in. Like it was almost time.
Wow. And
obviously the women's body's got a lot of hormones going through it, relaxant and whatnot, so it swelled up. She was sprinting around on a computer chair, like a work chair with wheels. Anyway, so going through speaking to our midwife, our private midwife at this stage, it was a really nice experience being for the first one. So we were really supported, we were really heard, and we'd set up this great plan that we were able to go down to this private space and labour there and birth there. Being the first, we didn't really know what to expect. So waters broke and the labour came on really quick, and out with the phone on the app and time the contractions. And I can't recall how long it was, but it was pretty early into it, like within an hour. So contractions were quite close together, and typically when they're close together, that means baby's not too far away, or from what we've told. So we've rushed down to the birth house there. However, 4 to 5 days later, Sarah's still labouring, and the biggest issue there was the waters had broke for 48 hours, so they wanted her to go into the hospital. And that's probably when that shift had changed mentally. Or obviously Sarah was quite tired and fatigued, so we sort of gave consent. Baby was fine, all the checks were fine. We're in the hospital system, and obviously there's a lot of noise. It wasn't calm, it was buzzing and beeping and people in and out. And as you know, with the shift change with midwives and doctors, you can get some really, really nice midwives, and then you can also get some just quite forceful, I guess is a good word to describe it.
Can I ask you, as your role as like a support partner in that environment, how empowered or powerful did you feel in able to advocate for her or this situation, and with the knowledge that you had as well? How did that kind of feel as a support person being in that environment?
Yeah, so in the birth house, it was really good. The midwife sort of stood back and just let us have our space, and do you know what I mean? Like, it's the person that I love, so I want to do everything I can to help her through. Once we got into the hospital system, it was almost like there's a chair in the corner, you sit over there and we'll take over from here. But having said that, we also, because we didn't plan to go to the hospital and we wanted to do it in a private space, we didn't understand what it was going to be like. So that was probably part of it as well. But yeah, as I said, you get some of those midwives that can be a bit forceful, and it's almost like you're irrelevant. It's like, sit down, we've got it, we know what we're doing. Or you would suggest something or say something or ask a question. They'd tell you what you wanted to hear. They'd continue to do what they were doing. And the biggest one, I think, from the first pregnancy was this lady came in and the syntocin wasn't up to the level where it should be, but the pregnancy was progressing along really well. The prior midwife was happy with that. And then this new lady comes in and cranks it up to where it should be going off the time schedule. And that was it was hard to watch. So from my perspective, the woman that you love and you'll do anything for is there, but you can't do anything. But the only thing you can do to stop that is go, let's just book in and get this Caesar done. But having said that, I know how much my wife wanted to have a natural birth, and then we're in the hospital system. So now it was, let's still have a vaginal birth, but let's not have all the interventions. But yeah, that was sort of overridden, and it got too much. It got to that breaking point where my wife, I could just see the struggle on her face, and it was gut wrenching. It really was gut wrenching. It was hard to watch, and I'm asking my wife questions. Asking questions why labour is interesting, and I've got a story later on, but she's there to give birth, not to answer questions. Essentially, she needs to be in the right headspace. The big shift came. She felt the baby drop, and I could tell from just her expression that something had shifted. I didn't know what it was. I couldn't feel anything, but something had shifted, and she tried to, pardon me, fight for someone to do another observation before going in, because I think the Caesar had already been booked at this stage, and they wouldn't. They sort of continued on with that process of going down the Caesar.
And I think I just wanted to say there, Ben, I think from memory, this new midwife, she was really authoritarian, and she was even dictating to the obstetrician what was happening. And even when Sarah kind of wanted to have, this midwife was even overpowering the obstetrician. Yeah.
It's hard to recall now. I guess it was really hard to watch, and we'd sort of made that decision, we're going to have a Caesar, but hang on a minute, things are moving. And then, that obstetrician took every opportunity to keep pushing forward. Now that I know the crisis of confidence, I knew what was happening, or now I know what was happening at that time. Anyway, we went down to the Caesar. Sarah's still unsure, really uncomfortable getting the needle in the back. I can't remember what it was now. And then I guess just looking at my wife laying there on the table, sort of helpless and defeated, was sad. Even though it's one of the most joyful times, or it's meant to be, that was really interesting. So anyway, the baby comes out, we meet our baby, and that's all wonderful and amazing. And bit of a unicorn baby, to be honest. Slept really well, fed really well, and just an absolute doer. He's a really good kid now, which is great. But that was hard. So we learned a lot from that process. Then we moved on to, later on, obviously, our second child, and we learned a little bit about the hospital system. We researched a little bit more, so knew we had a bit more power than, we could refuse things, or we have power in the hospital system. It's probably the biggest thing to remember.
And you fell pregnant really quickly with this one. This was only like 3 or 4 months postpartum too, wasn't it?
Correct. Yeah, we had a we had a really good day. A really good day in the terms that he was sleeping through the night. Like nearly every feed and every sleep was perfect for this day. And we're like, what would be the harm in having a second child? It's not that bad. So anyway, we tried that night, and then the next morning we're like, oh, that's a bit silly. Let's just wait a little bit longer. But anyway,
too late.
Done.
Yeah,
which is fine. So here we are going through that. More so, my wife going through that pregnancy again. Probably hadn't fully recovered and whatnot, but we were blessed because we're thinking back that we were once told that we couldn't have any children, and we planned that life without children. So here we are. We fell pregnant really quickly. We tried once, so we were really grateful that we could even have a child, and here we are pregnant with this, or here's my wife pregnant with the second child. So we weren't annoyed or frustrated or anything like that. We were really grateful, but a bit like, oh, maybe we've gone a little bit too early.
and also just I'm remembering back, it's all coming back to me now from having a chat with Sarah. Also the doctor told her she was not fertile with no medical tests. It was just like looking at her, like just making it up, you're infertile. There was no tests or anything, which is so bizarre.
Yeah, absolutely bizarre. And it's really challenging to hear that, because obviously the doctors and those medical experts, I guess they're trained in these areas, so you sort of trust them.
Of course,
and being told that and I don't know, maybe they've seen something that we didn't know anything about. We don't know, but I don't know, it does a lot of damage mentally. Having said that, pregnant with our second child really quickly. So we'd had a boy for the first up, so we're like, well, it'd be pretty handy if we had another boy. That pretty much just go from one size of clothing down the line. Later on, again, we wanted to go down that private midwife, but because it was so close together, we didn't have we weren't in a financial position to do that. So we went down that VBAC side of things. And
can I ask you, before we go on a little bit more, when it came to paying for that support the first time round, how did Sarah get that across to you? Or was it something that you always felt was valuable to have that, paid support? Because I know sometimes partners don't understand the value in hiring or investing, but when you can go in the system that's free.
Yeah, well, I'm in the health sector.
Okay.
So I deal with people on a daily basis.
Okay.
So for me, when I think about pregnancy and birth, I relate that to what it was like for our ancestors. And, there was no Western medicine, so it was all natural. It was, some women would walk down to the river and have their birth there. There was no intervention. They just did it when they were ready. Baby came out when it was ready. So the mum and the baby worked together. So I was very supportive of having a natural birth, and as much as we can, it was nice in the early days. It was nice to have people around us that we could bounce questions off, because you watch all your movies and things like that, and waters break on the main street, and then it's just on, and they get rushed to the hospital, and baby's born within 5 minutes on the TV show, but it's only a few hours on the TV show, and it's nothing like that. Well, definitely was now, since Sarah laboured for between 3 and 5 days for our children.
Yeah.
So I was very happy to go down the private sector. And I guess when you think about when you go to hospital, it's because there's a serious issue. You go there because you've broken a bone or you're very ill, where it wasn't that in our situation. It was we would be going there to have a baby, or my wife would be going to have a baby. So
you were looking for like a natural approach, and that's where the private side came in for you, and it made logical sense. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So in terms of the financial side of things, like, it was quite expensive, but we thought, I definitely supported my wife. I think it was definitely worth it. And we would have certainly done it again that second time around if we had the opportunity to do so, or had the money to do so. anyway, we went through the VBAC clinic, and my wife sort of was arm and and even throughout the early appointments, and she's like, oh, like it was all right. Like we had some good appointments, and they listened to me and they heard me, which was really good. And that was all well and good up to, I think it was like 37 or 38 weeks. I know it was sort of late in the pregnancy. And then the tables had turned. It was like, right, you're going to be booked in at 2 weeks for your Caesar, baby's going to be born on the 40-week mark and all this sort of stuff. And we're like, hang on a minute. Like, no. Like, we're here to be supported through the vaginal birth. Like, we knew my wife went over, and at this time we knew she ovulated later. So naturally that 40-week mark was, probably like too early for her. So that was really difficult. And then we're like, trying to remember how it all happened, but in the end, we did not feel supported within the last 2 appointments with the VBAC clinic. So then we looked into going to one of the regional hospitals that was close by. And again, the first appointment, they told us what we wanted to hear, but then the second appointment, they were then, all right, when are we going to book this baby in? Now, I think it was maybe around that 40-week mark now. We're like, hang on a minute, like you said you would support us, and now you're not supporting us. And obviously for the woman, like there's so much that has already changed. The hormones are through the roof at the moment. And I agreed with my wife that we definitely didn't feel heard. Like they heard us, but they did not support us in the end. So then I think my wife mentioned something like, I'd rather just have this baby at home, and then it can be done in a natural way. And obviously in the heat of the moment, all the hormones are very high, often being my wife said some things in the heat of the moment type thing. But having said that, I'm like, well, I'd be supportive of that. Because, one of the terms that stick out with that pregnancy was you can't fit a round peg in a square hole.
Oh, no, I heard that myself. And I was
looking,
what are you talking about? Who's the round? Who even says that? That's so weird.
Yeah. And I guess the hard thing, like hearing this over the last few weeks, the hard thing was I couldn't always take time off work to go to these appointments, to be, even if I didn't talk, just to be that extra strength of pillar for my wife to advocate for herself. So that was really challenging.
And I do think, anyone listening, I do think that having a male or a partner, especially a male partner, I feel like that does give a united front and give that strength as well. I feel like sometimes women are often, like intimidated, made vulnerable, made feel small, because it is such a masculine environment as well. Yeah,
absolutely. And that's where, again, if you listen to Sarah's podcast, that's where the Child Protective Services knocked on our door, and we're like, what the hell? And obviously the last thing she wanted at 41 weeks, or what we wanted. And we explained our situation, and they're just like, oh yeah, no issues there. It's like, not like we weren't going to go to a hospital if we needed to, like we would. Anyway, so that was all well and good, but then I guess that case was lingering over us through that birth.
How did that feel for you, having CPS come to your door? Because CPS is such that's a scary, having CPS called in. That's a full-on situation. How did that kind of feel for you guys?
It was quite traumatizing, to be quite honest. It was very difficult, and I still again had to. I was taking a little bit of time off work, but I still was working because I wanted to take as much time off when the baby was born. But here we are discussing this late at night. My wife just wants to rest; she's exhausted. But here we are talking about what if, because we hadn't heard anything. We didn't know what was going to happen. Not likelihood is the wrong word, but the possibility of us having our children removed from our care without even meeting baby number 2, it was there, like that they could do that. And we're just going, what the hell? Like, we just want to have a natural birth. That's all we're doing. We're not doing anything wrong. We're not mistreating our children. She's not abusing herself, which is affecting the second baby or anything like that. And so it was very traumatizing in that sense. But, we couldn't press pause on the birth or on the pregnancy. We had to keep going through it, unfortunately, or fortunately, but unfortunately we had to deal with that situation.
And CPS were called, from my understanding, but please let me know, was it because she wouldn't say yes to a cesarean?
Pretty much, that's what it came down to. So that lady, I think it was the lady who also made that comment, the circle peg in a square hole.
Mm.
We believe it was from her, which we'd later found out that she was also, like, she wasn't always the best midwife. There was she had a bit of a rep as such.
Okay.
Anyway, so labour continues on, and I guess the one thing to let everyone know is my wife has got incredible gut instincts on everything, whether that's, from hiring someone from a work point of view, business decisions, pregnancy, all this sort of stuff. She's got really incredible gut instincts, and sometimes I'll ask her, what do you think?
Oh, I love that. I love that. And I love that you trust her gut instincts as well.
So, and I always knew that if anything was ever wrong, she's not that person that she's not, I guess, pig-headed and be like, no, I said I wanted to do this and that's the only option that I'm doing. If I need to go to the hospital, I'll go to the damn hospital type thing. And that happened. So we woke up one morning, pretty early in the morning from memory. She noticed there was a little bit of meconium in the waters, and then she made a couple of phone calls, and I said, look, just come in, we'll do some testing. So we drove down to the larger hospital, and because we're panicking, and the advice that we got was, definitely come in. That's not a good sign. We might need to do something. So we drove down there, and then on the way down, it's about an hour drive, we're mentally preparing ourselves that, right, we need to go through another Caesar here. And we get down there, it takes ages to get in. Then they come and do some checks. They check the pads and things like that. Oh, yeah, there's a little bit of meconium in the water, but baby's not too bad. Like, it'll be okay for a little bit longer. So here we are, like hours later. I can't remember how long, but hours later, there was no urgent rush. Yet here's my wife feeling like if the baby doesn't come out, something serious is going to happen. Yet in that situation, for them, it wasn't a big deal. But prior to that, baby number one, baby was perfectly healthy and fine and moving and not showing any signs of distress, yet the urgency was to get that baby out immediately. And at the time, we're obviously panicking because we're like, no, I know my wife's got good instincts here. Like, this, it should be on its way out. Like, we should be going into theatre. Anyway, it didn't, or she didn't go in straight away. We waited a long time, and then they finally got in. And then this I found the scariest thing for me once in theatre was with baby number one crying straight away. You could hear him before you could see him type thing. Whereas baby number two, he wasn't making any noise. He was quite limp for the first minute or so. And I'm just going, oh, crap. Oh, like that 1 minute felt like a very long time. And then eventually started crying and things like that. And all seemed okay, I guess. They never said anything. However, I think something happened. I reckon she was in theatre for quite some time, and then she ended up saying, or the medical team ended up saying that I could go down to that place.
Is it the special? Did he go to special care?
Not immediately. No.
Okay.
So that it's not the
nursery?
waiting room.
Yeah,
like just down the recovery room. I think.
Oh, recovery, sure. Yeah.
Something like that. So I went down there and was holding this little baby, another boy. So we had two, and anyway, like it felt like it was taking a long time for Sarah to come down. I certainly felt a lot longer than what it did with number one. So I think she lost a lot more blood this time around from memory. I can't remember, but anyway, finally came down here. We got this baby. We got moved upstairs into the ward upstairs, and Sarah had made a couple of little comments like, oh, look, it doesn't seem like he's doing what he's meant to do. Like, and we're only judging from number one. And anyway, again, depending on the midwife you get, Sarah made a few or asked a few questions and said a few things about what was going on, and sort of got brushed off. And I'm pretty sure it was some or an older lady, an older midwife who'd been around the block a few times, and she ended up explaining to Sarah, like, I agree, I think there's something wrong. I think we should do something about it, but it was taking a long time for a doctor to come up to have a look. So she goes, I'm going to call a met call, and gave us a warning about what a met call was. And I'm like, oh yeah, no worries. Like, that'll be fine. It'll be a few people. And
so from your memory, what did she explain would happen, kind of thing?
She said like a lot of people would come in the room, and I was thinking a lot would be like 5, maybe 10 people.
Okay.
So a lot of people would come into the room. They're all going to be taking notes. There'll be a couple that will be doing some checks, because one person might do a check and some things might be okay from their point of view, but another one might do it that's been around a little bit longer and seen a few different things, and might pick up something else. I'm like, oh yeah, no worries, that's fine. Like, we'd rather people come up, do a check, and if baby's okay, then baby's okay. But if not, then they need to go to special care and get some treatment, etc. And yeah, it was the call went over, and then I don't know, it felt 30 seconds to a minute. There was just people coming through the door like no tomorrow, and it was just like, where the hell is this baby gone? Like we couldn't see it. There's people everywhere, and then within I don't know, maybe 5 or so minutes, like baby was out of the room. We were like, crap, where'd the baby go? It was gone. And we're like panicking, thinking, did we miss something? Did something serious happen? And then the midwife called us back over and then explained what was happening from now, which was very pleasing, but also hard at the same time, because it's very important for the mum and baby to have time together at such a young, also when they're so new, and baby's been wheeled off downstairs, etc. So that was challenging, and my wife obviously could not really move very well because it was another Caesar. I feel like as well with this one, they had maybe an intravenous, or they had something in, and it was really like, it was painful. I remember her saying that she could feel like the end of the needle or whatever it was. She goes, the pain's there, like I can't feel it anywhere else, it's just there. And they wouldn't listen, so she's wheelchaired down and things like that, and we went in there eventually. But yeah, that was later on when we're reflecting on it, it's quite challenging, because my wife again knew that, or felt like something was wrong, got blown off like, yeah, no, there's nothing wrong, baby's fine. And then here we are, baby's in special care in there for 5 days, I think, from memory. And we've got a 13 or 14-month-old at this stage. I've dropped the first baby off at our friend's place, who I said, I'll be back later today. And here we are in special care. Sarah was upstairs for a few days and then was able to stay across from special care, which was nice. But I've got this baby and we want to spend time together. My wife's panicking. She's going in and out of nursery to try and establish breastfeeding, all that sort of thing. So she was doing it really tough. And the one thing I wanted to do was to be there to help support her. But we also had our other child at home. So that was really challenging at that time. Yeah, so we got through that. I think I'm pretty sure we had a conversation with one of the medical team about planning, if the infection markers didn't improve, what was then going to happen and the likelihood of him not making it. And that was, again, another just like, what the hell? Like, thinking back, my wife knew she felt like there was something wrong, and now you're telling us that we might lose this baby. Like, it was crazy. Yeah,
it's challenging as well, because things happen so fast in that system, and then there's so much that is discussed, but things can change so dramatically in a matter of hours or 24 hours or something like that as well. But yeah, you got that, basically, that you were told there was something wrong with your boy and he had an infection and that. So, Sarah's intuition was spot on when it came to that baby again. And it kind of goes to show, like, I think one of the hardest things, especially in the system, is that they need a reason. Like, when you say there's something wrong, if you don't have the diagnoses or something like that, it's really hard for them to kind of move forward with, so until they find something, it's like they can't do anything because they don't know, do they? But our intuition is so sometimes amazing and spot on.
Incredible. Yeah, it's incredible. And just watching that over the time with our 4 children now, it's like, how do you even know that?
Yeah.
Cheers, I don't know, I just know.
I know, it's funny though, because you look at, I've got 3 children. Like my middle child, if there's ever anything wrong with her face gives it away straight away. Like, nobody else would really pick it up, but you just, what's wrong, what's happening, what's going on? She's either being naughty or she's hurt herself or something, and you're like, straight away, you know, it's just incredible.
Yeah, so 5 or 6 days later, things start to improve, and then we're able to go home. And I think once we knew things were improving, my wife's like, I just want to get out of here. Like, we just want to sort of establish our routine. And by this time, she was checking pretty much, she almost qualified as a midwife in those 5 days. She was there for all the checks. They were telling her what was going on, which is really good. They done a really good job of explaining things to her, so she knew what to look out for when she got home. So we finally got home, and she was still trying to re-establish breastfeeding, I believe, at this time, and making sure that he was okay. But because he had sepsis, or they believe he had sepsis, he was quite snuffly. So you always felt like he was about to get quite sick. But that was part of it. So I believe it was within 2 weeks we had a visitor when we felt comfortable about having people over. They had a couple of children come around, and we didn't realise at the start because they all seemed fine, but the youngest one had a snotty nose and had a bad cough, and we didn't hear it until they were about to go, and we looked at each other like, you've got to be kidding, because we knew what could happen. And yeah, within a day or two, my wife was back down in peds with number 2 because he'd got crook. So I spent another few days down there, and it was almost like we'd almost separated for 3 or 4 days, because I had one at home who needed a lot of attention, and she was down there, needed her full attention on making sure that she knew what was going on, and when they got home that she knew what to do when he needed help. So we got through that and finally got home, and so she had to re-establish breastfeeding, I think for the 3rd time now, which was hard in itself. So we got into a routine and were able to do things the way we wanted to do, in a lot more of a calmer environment. And I guess for the next, or up until he was 6 months, it was pretty much my wife was sleeping in the spare room, always nearby, even though he was fine. At a certain point, she just wasn't very sure. Like, she's like, oh, I don't know, I'd rather be there. So we slept in separate rooms for quite a few months, or not necessarily every night for quite a few months, but again, we're sort of living relatively separate lives there for a few months, which is really challenging, because then our relationship was separate, like, growing afar by the sounds. And then even when she goes, can you just do tonight? Can you go in there? I had no idea, because I couldn't count respiratory rate, even though she tried to teach me, and she didn't. Like, she was trying to tell me all these things to look out for, and I'm just like, well, it's like information overload. And I felt bad, because then I couldn't help, and she didn't feel confident with me being there, trying to keep this baby alive. And I'm like, yeah, like, I agree. Like, I don't feel confident being here. So she sort of got the raw end of the stick there, but I tried to look after number 1 as much as I can. And anyway, we got through, and then we went away into some drier weather at about 6 months, and that was a huge turning point for him. He got a lot better. That runny nose cleared up, or that snuffly nose, I should say, cleared up. And then we got on to number 3. There's about 2 years difference, so about 13 months, I think, roughly 13 months, 14 months after number 2. My wife fell pregnant with number 3. And at this stage, we'd been through all of that. We're like, all right, what are we going to do? She's like, well, I'm not going to the hospital. I do not want to go there unless it's absolutely necessary. And I needed to be a lot stern with my support. And I'm like, yeah, I definitely do. I'm a sucker, because I don't want to see her in pain. I want the best for her. I know she's got good gut instincts, so I was challenging. So in the end, I think we both sort of agreed that I couldn't take the emotion out of it. We needed someone who could take the emotion away, but was still able to advocate for everything she wanted. So now we're moving into the COVID situation.
Is this in a hospital birth, or were you planning a home birth at this point?
Planning a home birth at this point with the doula.
And when you say to take the emotions out, what did you mean? What were you kind of feeling? And when you said you had to be stern, what was kind of happening?
Yeah, so basically, if we ended up in a hospital and the doctor said, right, this is happening, this is what we need to do, we need to increase syntocin by this, or we need to go in for a Caesar right now, it's like, no, hang on a minute. we're here to have a natural birth, and this is what we want to try and do. We're just in your environment if something goes wrong.
Sure.
So like to be stern.
Sure.
But then the emotion was seeing my wife in a lot of pain, going through labour, fatigue. So with both of the first two, she'd laboured for 4 and 5 days, or 5 and 6 days, or something ridiculous. So it was long. Like we were both tired, we were both exhausted by the end of it. And I guess my wife's running off those hormones in the body, whereas I'm trying to live off caffeine, and be there. I don't want to sleep because then I won't be able to support her. So that was quite challenging.
Did you feel like you needed like a support partner yourself, as like to take some of that off you, or what were you kind of feeling that?
Yeah, I think like, yes, that would have been good, but at the same time, it wouldn't have been the same support for my wife, if you know what I mean. Like, she could say whatever she wanted to me, and that's fine, whatever, I accept it. You're labouring.
Yeah.
But at the same time, she wanted to be in a comfortable environment, and I feel like she's that person where she wouldn't be able to be herself if there was someone else there. Whereas with our midwives and things like that, they were able to sort of just come in, sneak down, sit in the corner, pretty much fly under the radar. So she could be herself, didn't even know anyone else was in the room. Whereas if it was I left the room and someone else came in, then should be aware that there was someone in the room, so she wouldn't be able to be herself and sort of, be in that zone. Anyway, so we talked about the doula, agreed that a doula was really good. She found this person, connected really well. So all that care and conversation before labour had started, really connected, felt really comfortable. And because COVID had started as well, at this stage there was only one person in the hospital. I think it changed a few times. You could have no one, then you could have one person, whatnot. So we made the decision that the doula would be that person if they end up going to the hospital. I'd stay home with the kids. She felt comfortable with me being at home with the kids. I felt comfortable with the doula going there because we got along really well, and she was really good in that sense leading up. She was quite stern. She told us a few stories, and we're like, yeah, but if we're going to have someone that goes in there that's not me, we need someone who's going to be strong, that knows what my wife wants to achieve and how she wants to go about it. So we did that, and then my wife went into labour. We'd moved away, so we were living closer to the main hospital at this stage. And I think, my wife had, I can't remember what it's called, but really severe hip pain. Like, she's been on bed rest for the last 10 weeks or so. Felt like eternity. Like, she couldn't do anything. She could do a little bit in the morning, but she couldn't go out for walks. Mind you, even if she could, the hospital, the playgrounds were closed, so there's no out for her mentally, but also now physically, because she was laying on the couch for the majority of the day because she just was in so much pain with her hips. Labour kicked off, all going reasonably well. Obviously, there's a lot of pain there because of her hips. We got the doula to come around, and she was really good. I felt like she was really good at the start, but I think once labour progressed, I think Sarah says this as well. I know Sarah, and she's very strong mentally. She just needs to be told that she can do something. And if you keep encouraging her and saying that she can do it, she will eventually prevail and be able to do it. Whereas when that happened, we probably were definitely Sarah, and I sort of feel like, she just needed to change, even it might have been one sentence even in the hour, but it was just casting that slight doubt that she couldn't do it. Anyway, probably one of the big things was my wife said, I can't go on for 4 to 5 days of labour. Like, I'm going to give myself a time limit, and if it's not from here, if we get to this point and the baby's not here, then I'm just going to go in for a Caesar, which is all good because that was her decision. So I'm like, you're the one that's grown the baby, you're the one that's your body's changed, all that sort of stuff. So I'm happy to support you with that.
To be fair, again, I don't think many women would survive 4 to 5 days in labour. That is a big ask as well. So
yeah, definitely. So we tried a few different things, and then I think even the doula at this stage had said, I'm not too sure what else we can do. It might be worth considering going to a hospital. So at that point, this was quite late, late at night, closing in on the new morning. And I think just that little bit of doubt from our support person, who we were, again, sort of trusting to help us through, who'd had a relatively good track record, that bit of doubt. And again, knowing my wife, it was just like, if my support person can't trust me to do this, then I'm defeated. Like, I need that person to be on my team. So she goes, I'm just going to get through to this time. And then if it's not here or it's not progressing, then that's it. And that happened. So we went in, and it had the third child via cesarean. And I guess after that, again, that wasn't, I guess the decision wasn't as bad, because she got to the time limit. So mentally she goes, it was my choice to go in for this Caesar. It's not my preferred outcome, but it was my choice. And that was probably the biggest takeaway from that birth, was that it was her choice. And that's all she wanted, was to have that choice, and that choice be heard and listened to. Then reflecting back on that, it was probably, again, that crisis of confidence. Like, there was probably additional pain there because of my wife's hips, but also that crisis of confidence. Like, we probably didn't try as many changing of positions to try and get that baby to shift and relieve a bit of pressure on the hips and whatnot. So, we learnt from that as well. Then we talked, I think at one stage, we weren't going to have any more children. Just, it become too much. I said this to my wife, I felt like with every Caesar, a little bit of her was taken away. Like, her confidence was less. Her mindset about having a baby naturally had reduced. And then that comment from number one, is that the square peg in a round hole, was like, maybe that's right. So that was really challenging times to, come to terms with that. And, but we're positive people. So baby number 3 comes along, was born healthy, still via cesarean. And she, my wife got this feeling, she goes, I still don't think I'm done though. She goes, I just don't feel like I'm done. Like, I don't really feel like I've given birth to the 3 children. I know that I grew them, and I know that I laboured with them, but it didn't go the way I wanted it to. So I don't feel like I really birthed them. So then, we fell pregnant again with number 4. So again, this is probably, it was about 17, 18 months. Oh, it's 20 months difference. Let's get confusing now. There's too many children.
Yeah, too many children to keep up.
Yeah. So full pregnant again, and not really a shock, but we weren't not trying to have a child, but if it happened, it happened. Again, we're grateful to have 3 because of our previous history. So if we could have 4, and I was open to 4, I'm more than happy. My wife was willing to fall pregnant, grow the child, and birth the child. There's not a whole lot that us males can do. So as long as my wife was willing to go through that again, I'm more than happy to do that. And we did. So we fell pregnant, or my wife fell pregnant. She's growing the 4th baby. We discussed our options at the start, and I think by now she was really defeated. It was just, that's 0 from 3. I'm just going to book a Caesar when the time comes, but I'm going to hold off. I don't want to make a decision now, but I feel like that's the way it's going. And the biggest thing is she wanted to avoid the fighting, the hospital system. She didn't feel heard. So she's like, I just want to make the decision now, and that's just it. Then I'm heard. Anyway, so we're moving through, and then she caught up with one of her girlfriends. They went and seen the movie. You mentioned this at the start, and I can't remember the name. Do you remember the name of the movie?
Yeah, the movie's called Birth Time, and it just come out. It was an Australian production, and everyone was going to see it. So she went and saw the movie.
Yeah, she went and saw the movie, and even just to her body language. So we didn't talk about anything about her birth options after that for probably a couple of days, I think. But even just the way she was, she seemed different, a little bit, like a bit more confident in herself, which is a little bit strange. And I had no idea. maybe not a typical male, but maybe I am. I had no idea what birth time was. I just know it was about women and birthing and stories.
Of course,
and then eventually she came to me and she goes, I think I'm going to have a home birth. And I'm like, I was sort of nervous and excited. I'm like, what? What's the shift? Like, that's a big difference. And then again, we continue to discuss the options, and I'm like, right, yeah. Well, I was always confident that she would be able to have a natural birth. You know, I didn't understand why women years ago, or even now, but like more so years ago, they could all have home births or free births or whatever you want to call it. But what's the difference now other than our medical system? I'm like, if anything, we've got the best medical professionals now that have got training and they've got all the equipment. People can come to us if we need it.
Yeah.
So I don't understand why the push is to always go on for cesarean when we've got such a good medical system now in terms of helping someone in life and death situations. So,
you know, my husband was exactly the same when it came to like that deep trust in my body. And I think like it could be a male thing, I don't know, but you're looking at that evidence, I suppose. You're looking at like thinking from a logical standpoint, whereas as a woman, for me, it was a very emotional, you know, can my body do it? I'm a failure. I'm broken.
yeah.
It's all on me because it's my body. Whereas the man's kind of like, my husband was like, you've got this. Like, and I'm like, but I haven't done it twice before. And he's like, yeah, you'll be right. I'm like, what? How do you know? And he's like, yeah, I just know. Like,
yeah, and that's right. Like that's certainly come up many times. Is like once she'd made that decision that she wanted to try it, and then I was very supportive. So then it became our decision to try it.
Mm-hmm.
I guess so she felt a bit more comfortable because now I was on board, and she was very nervous about what I would think.
Yeah.
Because as I said, it's not very often that the males not necessarily get to make the decision. I don't want it to sound like it's our decision because it's definitely not. It's
a joint.
certainly
I
the
think
woman's.
it should be at least joint.
Yeah. So, but we were both on the same page of how we want to do it. So then my mindset then switched to, right, what do I need to do around the house to make sure this is a comfortable environment? Whereas later on, my wife's like, no, you need to know how to support me when there's no one else to lean on to.
And I think that's very male as well, because when I've had my first baby, my husband was like outside doing all the man stuff, like wanted to be busy and do stuff. Like that's kind of maybe your nesting way or something, keeping busy doing things. And as women, we definitely need that emotional support and connection and nurturing and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. So my wife just goes, you need to listen to Rhea Dempsey. I've got this podcast. I've got these 2 podcasts. Mm-hmm. Listen to them as many times as you want, but you need to remember some of this stuff or most of the stuff. Right, no, I can do that. And then I'm still going in my head and going, yeah, but I need to know that, you know, if she wants the pool, how am I going to get that pool set up? How am I going to run the water into the pool?
So you're thinking about the practical stuff.
Yeah.
That's your main concern.
Yeah. So anyway, so I listened to Rhea Dempsey and she said some really good things. So that's probably my advice to some of the males out there is listen to Rhea Dempsey. You might have some information about her and some links to some of her
Sarah
podcasts.
Loved her. That was she was a real big change for Sarah. I remember her saying that was one of her biggest things.
Yeah, and I guess everything she said, there was a few times where she mentioned some stuff that was like, well, that's way over my head. But then there was a lot of things where she mentioned, it was just like, of course. Like, I don't know why I didn't think of that. So that the crisis of confidence that I've mentioned a couple of times, that's where that come from. And she talks about it and explained it really, really well. So every time, probably too often at times when my wife was labouring, the later stages, I kept saying, crisis of confidence, you know, it's just a crisis. Let's just get through this, you know, let's give it some time, etc. Pardon me. So we got through that. But in terms of the setup, so I listened to Rhea. I'd sort of worked out how I was going to get the pool set up if we needed the pool set up. We worked out. My wife also said there needs to be space in our room. We've got quite a large room, so the space side of things was an issue. But she wanted to have this circuit set up. I can't remember what it's called, but it's called something circuit, and it's like trying going into a position, trying to stay in that position for a period of time before moving on to the next one. My wife probably mentions it in her podcast, in the podcast she did.
Probably. I'm not really too familiar with, I think it sounds like something like a spinning babies or something like that.
Yes, that's what it is. Yeah, spinning
okay,
babies.
cool.
That's the one. Yeah, there you go. So, didn't even know the name of it. She said she printed it all off. She had it all there. So she had the affirmation cards out, like we were sort of set. I'd worked out that I was going to
know what it is. Sorry, it's mile circuit. I remember it now.
That's the one. Yeah, that's the one. So I'd planned that, if we needed the pool, I was going to use my, I've got a painter's drop sheet. So it's the cloth with the plastic underneath. So water, if it got on, it wouldn't wreck the carpet, or, the later stages when baby's here, nothing's going to get into the carpet. We need to get it cleaned. And also, we also had a, pardon me, a food grade hose that we could use. We connected it to the tap, and I could run warm water into the pool that way. And then I bought a foot pump later in as well, so to help blow up the pool a lot faster. Still took a long time, but I got it. So the pool was the last resort for my wife. She goes, I know that's going to take at least an hour to get pumped up, and then I have to keep going for at least an hour before I get into that pool. So we're going through, and again, I guess leading up to that, my wife was like, I want to try to not avoid the hospital. I need to do what I need to do to get them off my back from our previous history. So she went to the appointments. She done what she needed to do. She had those conversations, and then she goes, look, I'll book in. I'll still have a Caesar date booked. And the idea was that we wouldn't get to that date. So getting closer to basically kick-off day, essentially, my wife said that we've got everything set up. We knew what we wanted to do. We knew how we wanted the room. We had the diffuser with some oils going, some soft lighting, all that sort of stuff was set up. But affirmation card set up. And then my wife's like, make sure that you listen to Rhea Dempsey again. Make sure you get familiar with the mile circuit, and make sure you know about the spinning babies. Yeah, no worries. So I did that. Probably not the spinning babies and the mile circuit. I still not probably need to research that a little bit more. Let's be more familiar with that. But I just trusted she knew what she was doing. Her body knew what she was doing. The baby knew what it wanted to do. And then that I just needed to provide that calm and supportive room, essentially. But she goes, I do not want you to ask me any questions. I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, don't ask me if I want a drink. Don't ask me if I want some food. Like, just say, here's some water. Here's some fruit. Here's this. Don't say, do you want? I'll get angry and I'll kick you out of the room, and I'll just have to do it by myself. So call it strong woman, call it stubborn, whatever you want to choose. But she, as I said, she's got really good gut instincts. She knew what she wanted. So she knew that it's going to come down to her and the baby working together to get the baby to come out. And I was just there to help support or keep that environment, supportive and calm. So the labour kicked off. It was early afternoon, or not necessarily afternoon, sort of late afternoon, probably around 5 or so. I remember it was close to dinner time. So we had dinner at 5 o'clock. So it was around about then. But my wife was helping finish off dinner, and she goes, oh, I feel like things are starting to start. I'm like, okay. She's like, but I don't feel like it. Nothing feels too bad yet. So I might just keep moving. I'm like, all right, no worries. So she got up and she finished dinner off, and we bathed the boys and, did the bedtime routine. And it, not went full tilt, but, it progressed. She goes, oh, no, like they're getting stronger. I'm like, okay, well, that's good. Like, let me just, you do what you want to do. Like, keep moving, do whatever you want to do, but let's get this house cleaned up. Kids are in bed, and then we can go to bed and have an early night, because we've got 3, 4, 5 days of this, is what I'm thinking. So I reached out to our city and just said, hey, look, things are starting to go. If there's any chance that I need to give you a call, would you mind popping over and looking after the kids, or we can pick up the kids, or whatever it was? Yeah, no way, that's fine. So it's about 8 or 9 o'clock. Things are still progressing. We're in bed, and it's just labouring in bed on her side, and I'm just there, like I'm awake, just, rubbing her hip or holding her hand or, telling her to breathe. And, I sort of feel like I was helping with the breathing. Like I do a count, so I count really slowly, and then she sort of breathes through all of that, which was working well. Got to about 10 o'clock, I think, and then it sort of went up another level. Things started to intensify. And by this stage, I ran down, because the other thing she said, I know I need to do it by myself, and I don't want you in the room all the time. Like, I don't want you there sometimes, because I need to know that I can do it by myself. I want to do it by myself, and I'm the only person that can make this happen. Like, no worries. So more often than not, when she, every now and again, more often than not, I was just standing out the door with the door open. So I was always there. Do you know what I mean? So I could always be hearing her and just being close if things progressed too fast. But I went down to the kitchen.
Sorry, was that challenging for you to kind of work out when you're going to be there, when you're not, or were you just kind of guided by your intuition, or were you in your mind kind of, I've got to leave now, is this the right time?
Yeah, in the early stages it was fine. I just, because for me, like, I guess, yeah, it was the early stages, it was no worries at all. I'm just like, I've been here for a while, because I'm not resting in between. I'm sort of thinking, right, got about another 2, 3, 4 minutes. Here comes the next one. So if I was going to do anything, I needed to be, a couple of minutes and come back to sport. And I didn't want her to be by herself. I wanted her, because the room was really dark, very small light. And obviously she was labouring, and then contractions were starting. So then it was almost like she was not necessarily sleeping in between, but sort of just zoning out in between, just switching right off in the early stages. So it was just like, I might just sneak out. I said, hey, I'm just going to pop down to the kitchen, or I'm just going to go check the boy. I think I said I was going to go check the boys nearly. I don't know. That was probably my main line. I'm just going to go check the kids, make sure they're asleep. Yep, no worries. And then I'd stand at the door for 2 or 3 contractions and sort of observe from afar. But then I got down to the kitchen and got a bowl of fruit. So blueberries and strawberries were the main things that she'd liked previously. So had them there, got some coconut water and just some normal water, so she could choose what she wanted, or I could just offer a couple of different things. And then it progressed to about 12 o'clock. It started getting more. So then by 12, I think we're up, moving around, trying some of the mile circuit options. But the one thing I found a little bit more challenging was, you hear stories about when the women are contracting, they can say some odd stuff through contractions and then have no recollection of it once they're not contracting anymore, for that little bit of time in between. Whereas my wife remembered everything. So we're having this conversation about how she was feeling. She wanted to, she can't do it, that doubt. She wanted to go to the hospital, and all that sort of stuff came in. But there was no off. It was just on. And it was on more when she was contracting than when she wasn't, but it was still on. So we're having this conversation, and that's probably the thing I found the hardest was, again, the woman that you love is telling you that she can't do it. She's had enough. She wants it to stop. She wants to go to the hospital. Just call the ambulance or get in the car. I'm done. Like, the amount of time she said, I am done and I can't do this, was through the roof.
And I think, because I wanted to ask you about this when I interviewed Sarah, I was really intrigued about this because she mentioned this as well. You had a conversation before the labour started, and she had asked you to not listen to you or something like that. Is that right? Or if she says, send me to the hospital, you were supposed to stop her or something? Or what was the conversation that you had? Because this helps add to that story of why you didn't just call the ambulance.
She said, I know there's going to be a point when I'm labouring that I want to go to the hospital, and I don't want you to take me to the hospital. I want you to refuse me to go to the hospital. Tell me you can't. Tell me you've lost the keys, or just make up something. And I'm like, yeah, no way, like I can do that. But I already know, and I'm like, oh, that's going to be such a battle.
Yeah. So tell us about, how did you kind of navigate that situation when she's told you, and then she's in the actual thick of it, experiencing it, and that she's begging to go to the hospital?
Yeah.
How did you stay strong and know what needed to happen in that situation?
Yeah, I guess we're probably both a little bit stubborn in a sense. I My big thing was I knew there was nothing wrong with her because she was still able to move. She was still labouring. There was nothing out of the ordinary. And she never said there was an issue. Now I'm remembering that she's got really good gut instincts. She knew that baby number 2 there was something wrong, and there was. She knew that baby number 1, baby had dropped down, but then they refused to do any checks and completed the Caesar, and he came out with a cone head, and they're like, oh, was he born vaginally? And which probably added to it.
I think something that we didn't actually mention that Sarah mentioned was later on with the second baby, that, or even afterwards, the obstetrician came out, apologized and said you probably could have given birth vaginally with the first one, didn't she?
Correct. Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. And that's because baby had dropped into that, seemingly dropped down into the birth canal, because they said it was an issue to get him out. It was hard to get him out.
Yeah.
Because he had gone in and he had the cone head, like the head had squished together as if he was going through the birth canal. So I'm remembering that she's got really good gut instincts. She has not mentioned once yet that there's anything wrong. It was just that crisis of confidence. Wants to get it over and done with. She can't do it. How? And the other big point was how. There's a few F-bombs dropped. How can I do this for 4 days if this is what it's like, and we're not even half a day in? So we hadn't even got to 5 o'clock yet, because baby was born by 4:30. But we're talking maybe 6-7 hours in, maybe 8 hours max. And there's no way, I can't do it. So that doubt from her mind and that crisis of confidence has really set in. And it was difficult. This is probably the hardest thing. And I think if there's anything I can say is you need to, from a male perspective, you really need to know what your partner wants, because you really need to stand up in that moment when there's that crisis. So I think my wife was in the shower at this stage, and she was defeated almost. Like it was just because her heart was still pumping blood around the body that she was still going. And I cracked then. I sort of had lost it. I was bawling. Again, remembering that she is the lady that I love, and she's birthed our kids, and she's gone through so much. And how can I refuse her going to the hospital to have this baby so that the pain could stop and that she could get on with her life, etc. So that was probably the hardest thing. And then
you're really struggling at this point emotionally as well, like quietly away, obviously.
Yeah.
Really struggling to see the woman you love in so much pain and deny her what she effectively wants, knowing that it's not what she wants.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a mental battle at this stage. And then it was probably for about 5 or 10 minutes. And then I said, look, I'm going to leave the room. Like, I felt like it was a good time to leave the room, because she had always said that she's going to be the one that needs to do this for herself. So I thought, you know what, I'll leave the room. It's going to sound bad, but she was left to her own devices to get through a couple of these contractions. I can then have a couple of minutes, like a breather. Then the other end of the house, even though it wasn't a breather, everything was going through my head at that stage. And then I only need a couple of minutes, and I'm like, no, that's right. She said she was going to do this. She can do this. There's nothing wrong. That's it. Went down there and gave a bit of a stern wording. I said, no, stuff you said to me not to take you to the hospital unless there was something needed. There's nothing needed because you're able to move around. I know you're struggling. I know you're going through a crisis. That's it. You're not going. I'm not taking you. Anyway, that sort of sparked it. Well, stuff you. I'm going to drive myself.
Goodness me.
So she said she was going to drive herself. And then I'm like, whatever, like drive yourself then. I'll follow behind in the other car because you won't be able to get. She had to drive, or we had to drive an hour to an hour and 15 to go to the hospital where the Caesar was booked.
Yeah.
So I'm like, in my head, I'm like, no way. And Do you know what I mean? So it was a bit of a challenge. So I'm like, no, stuff this.
Yeah.
You wanted me to be stern. I'm here now, making sure you get the result that you want. And we'd obviously talked about that a heap of times. I said, no, you want this. Like, and obviously it wasn't always heated from there on. It was calm after that. It was just, those few minutes, 5-10 minutes, like, no, stuff you, et cetera, et cetera. You can do this. No, I can't. Yes, I can. I'll drive myself, or I'm not driving you. That sort of went on. And then, I don't know, there must have been a shift. I guess that crisis of confidence sort of ended. And then it was on to the next stage of the birth. And she apologized for having an outburst at me, and I apologized. It's just the wave of emotion. So we apologized to each other. And then I'm like, you can do this. You've done this. You just got through that really hard part. It was hard. It was challenging, and it was scary. I know. But I don't think you've got to that stage with any of the others. And you can do this because you are doing it. And, reaffirming all of those affirmation cards that, it's her body, and the pain that she's experiencing is her doing it to herself for a good reason, etc. So we got through that. And then obviously they continued to get stronger. And then I said, again, when it sort of started to rise up, and she was getting to that point where she's like, I just can't do this, Ben. Like, I really just can't. I had enough. I said, well, you told me that your last resort was the pool. How about I get that out? And she's like, right. But after that pool, if that does nothing, we are off. We're in that car. And then we decided on the time. She goes, what time will you let me go through this horrendous pain? And I'm like, oh, God.
Oh, goodness me.
Yeah. So I said something like, well, let's wait until the morning so that our carer could actually have a sleep before coming over. And she goes, no, I'm the one that's going to do this. It's 4:00. And I said, no worries. And it was like 2:00 now. She goes, that's it. 4:00, we're out of here. And again, if you don't do it, I'll drive myself. So it gets to 2:00, and again, this is where probably a bigger shift happened. It started to intensify. So I'm trying to get this pool blown up. So I've got my painter's tarp in. I've got the foam padding underneath, and we got the pool. I've got it set up, and I'm trying to pump it. And she goes, "I'll never forget that sound. It's like psh, psh of the noise of the pump." And I can't turn the light on because it's too bright. It's got this tiny little salt lamp light, which is actually being blocked at this stage. So I could barely see what I was doing. I'm trying to turn my phone light on. And she's like, can you just turn that bloody light off?
Oh, God.
I'm like, oh, this is just a nightmare. So then I'm trying to pump up the base because we got one that's got a bit of padding. Like you blow up the bottom.
Yeah.
So it's soft. And in my head at the same time, I'm going, like, she's giving me 4:00. By the time I've got everything sorted, it's already 2:30, 2:45. I'm like, and I need to pump this up and get it full, and she needs to be in it for a period of time before 4:00. And she was constantly asking for the time, but I was just going, it's 2:05 and it's 2:10, and it's like 2:30. I'm like, yeah, it's only 2:15, and all that sort of stuff. And I'm pumping up. I felt like for a good 20 minutes. It probably wasn't, but it felt like 20 minutes pumping up the bottom of this pool.
It probably was 20 minutes because you were using a foot pump as well.
It could have been.
Yeah.
But I realised, and I could not believe it, that I've plugged the pump into the drain hole. So it's going through
hole.
It's going. So it's pumping into the
going
ground,
out into nothing.
Like, oh no! And she's like,
not
been
surprising.
pumping for about an hour. How far? And I'm like, oh, it's nearly there. And I hadn't even technically started. Anyways, geez,
do you think you would, if you could go back in time, do this before the labour kind of started and have it? Did you have a place to kind of have it ready? That's what we did.
Yeah, we could have had it ready. But no, I wouldn't, only because we had discussed this was going to be the last resort.
Okay, so this was your last resort sort of thing. Yeah.
It was the last resort because we discussed that, it's going to take about an hour to pump this thing up and get it full to a level. So that's an hour that my wife had to continue to go through labour. And then, it could be longer than that. We didn't know, but we're like, then it's about an hour. Then we said should be in the pool for about half an hour to an hour at the maximum. And then, so there's, let's say, an hour and a half, 2 hours. And then we knew that we had to get the carer to come over, which might have taken half an hour. And then it was the hour or so drive to the hospital. So, do you mean mentally we're like, this is a 3 hour plus process. when I get to that stage mentally where I cannot get going, I've got 3 hours in the bank, although it's going to be hard and challenging. But, again, it's almost that little bit of relief knowing that, right, the pool's coming. Because with baby number 3, when she got into the pool, it took all the pressure off her hips and pelvis, and it slowed her pregnancy, the labor down with baby number 3. She got in the pool, and like within probably 20 minutes, like her contractions almost reduced to nothing. Like they really slowed down. And I think that's why it was the last resort. It's to give that bit of pain relief, essentially.
Yeah, that's right. I think because everyone's got different reasons for doing things and experiences. Correct. So that makes complete sense as Correct. To why it was a last resort. Wonderful and helpful with the pain, but if it slowed your labor down, it's a double-edged sword, isn't it?
Yeah. So I guess fast forward a little bit of time, I finally got the pool pumped up and the water was running. And again, my wife probably asked 100 times, what time is it? And by the time the water was going in, and I reckon it was to a level where she could get in, it was like 10 to 4, and that was that cut off 4 o'clock. And she asked the time. She didn't want to look at her phone because, it was too bright for her eyes, etc. I'm like, oh, it's only, 3:05, so we've got about an hour or so. And she goes, oh, like, okay, got in the pool. And she was in the pool, and again, like these intensified even more now because, obviously baby was on its well and truly on its way now. And obviously I didn't know how to do any checks. I didn't know if she was 1 centimeter dilated or 10 centimeters, or I didn't have a clue in that sense. But, we were trusting the process. That was the big thing. I kept saying, we're just going to trust the process. But that doubt set in because she goes, I've never done this and I don't know what to do. And how do I know that the baby knows what to do when I've never done it? I don't know what to feel. I don't know anything. She goes, I can't do it. Anyway, so I said it was 3:05. It's now 10 to 4. And in my head, I'm going, oh, if she looks at the clock, I'm in trouble. And I actually got in the pool, and immediately I think she got a little bit of relief, but it was almost like she hit the water. And then from last time, it was the opposite. It just intensified because I don't know if it was just, she was on all fours. So whereas she had been in bed prior to that laying on her side, so now she was in bed on all fours, and that gravity started playing a bit of a role now too. So yeah, I reckon she was only in there for 10 minutes. She goes, that's it, we have to go now. Like, I can't do this. This is just too much. And I said, well, I'm not driving you down to the hospital because there's no issues with you or the baby. It's just the pain is too much. Like, I'm not doing this. We talked about it before. I'm not doing it. And of course she was like, well, I'm going to drive myself. I'm like, well, if you just get out of the pool, I'll help you walk down to the car and get sorted. I'll put your bags in the car and you can drive. I sort of felt like rather than battle her, like that mental side of it, I'd go along with helping her get sorted and she could drive herself. Anyway, it got to, a bit after 4 o'clock. And then out of nowhere, the whole shit, like, whether or not you're into energies and things like that, I don't know. I don't know if I believe in that, but the whole mood had shifted in 15 minutes of being in the pool. I reckon 20 minutes maybe in the pool, just everything changed. It just got even more calm. There was no, like, there's still contractions obviously, but they weren't long and they weren't hard. Like, they weren't challenging to get through. And then she's like, oh, can you just, like, and constantly in the pool, can you, like, oh, does it look like it's on its way? Does it look like it's anything happening? And obviously I've got no idea what I'm looking for, but I'm like, yeah, it looks like, it looks like something's happening. Yeah. And I was more reading from the re-edemsy and what the stuff she was saying. I'm like, yeah, it looks like, things are changing. Like, I can see that things are changing, and I can see, the vagina start to open up during contractions. And I'm like, look, I've got no idea if that's meaning baby's on its way or anything like that. But I'm like, well, if she's contracting and the vagina's opening, then something's happening there. Like, that's what I was thinking.
Well, I just want to say also, whenever there's a surge, something's always happening. So regardless of whether it's happening to the time frame that you want, but I suppose every time it's doing it, you kind of keep in mind this is one less surge or contraction you kind of have to go through as well.
Yeah, so, definitely.
Yeah.
So this whole energy change, and I'm saying, look, I think things can change. Like, it looks like things are happening. and then probably 5 minutes after that, when this whole energy sort of shift changed, it was just like, almost like it had stopped to a degree. She just sort of relaxed the edge of the pool, head is on the towel. She asked me to remove the cold face wash off the back of the neck. And she goes, oh, I'm just going to have a rest here. And this is when contractions were, really close together, and now they're a few minutes apart. I'm like, oh, crap, like, talk about this pool really slowing this process down. I didn't know if that was good or bad at this stage, because I felt like we'd already gone through a lot more, which we obviously had, than the prior labours. So, and then she was laying there for 5 or so minutes, and she goes, I think the baby's on its way. And I'm like, yeah, I think so too. And by this stage, I was still looking with the light, and the vagina's opening even more. And I'm like, oh, I think it's like, I don't know, it looks like things are happening. And again, referring back to Ria, I can't remember how she's explained it now, but she said you will start to see this and this, and this will start to happen, and it was all happening. So I'm like, I'm pretty sure things are happening. And I was saying that to my wife. I'm like, I'm pretty sure the baby's starting to get on its way here. And she goes, no, you don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't know anything. Shut up. Essentially, she goes, don't talk. I've had enough. I don't want any more water. I don't want any more food. Just let me be. I'm like, well, righto. Like, so I did. And then, pardon me, she said that, yeah, she felt like the baby was on its way, and I agreed with her. And then she goes, I'm just going to let it be. And then in my mind, I'm like, the one thing that my wife always wanted to do was capture the birth on camera. It was the same when I proposed. I had to get it photographed or it didn't count. And I managed to do that. And I managed to I started doing this stuff when she was, a little zone resting. I set up the camera. I put some music on. And again, because that energy had changed, so I'd changed some things that I was doing. So the music was playing, just some nice calming. Don't even know what the playlist was, but it was a birthing playlist or something like that. And then the camera was set up, and the camera was recording for 30 minutes, and that's 10 minutes after the birth as well. So from when she got into this state where just that energy shift changed, within 20 minutes, baby was out. Incredible experience. I had no idea what was going to happen because I hadn't seen it like that. I'd watched a couple of birth videos that my wife made me watch, and we could see the head. My wife said, she goes, I think I can feel the head, but I don't know what it feels like. It feels squishy. And then eventually she goes, no, that's definitely the head. It has to be the head. There's nothing else it can be. It has to be the head. And then I could start to see the baby was crowning, and I was telling my wife, I'm like, you're doing it. Like you're really doing it. I can see the baby's head now. Like, and it didn't look like the baby's head, or not when the baby's out, it didn't look like the baby's head, but obviously it's going through a tight hole. So, and she's like, I can feel it moving. I can feel it moving down. Like it's on its way. And she was over the moon, obviously overwhelmed with emotions and hormones, because, the baby was now on its way. And so we're having this odd conversation about this baby coming through. And then I remember, when the head comes out, you want to support the head, make sure the umbilical cord's not around the neck, and it wasn't, and the baby's coming out, and almost the baby coming out process didn't take long at all. Like, as I said, 20 minutes before the baby was out, and I reckon from when it was crowning to out, it was probably closer to 10 minutes or so. And the head just sort of popped out at this stage, and then within about 10 seconds, 30 seconds afterwards, one of her arms just flopped out, and I'm like, it caught me off guard. What the hell is that? What? Like, and it took a little while for me to realize it was her arm. And then shortly after that, baby sort of rolled just a fraction, then sort of slid out. But then it was probably from waist up. My wife is like, "Oh, it's out. I'm like, no, not yet. And because obviously the hardest part is the head, then the shoulders, and then it's relatively easier from there. And then eventually the baby came out, and I'd had the baby, and my wife was sort of not celebrating, but like couldn't believe that she'd actually been able to do this. And she was trying to rotate, but then the umbilical cord was not wrapped around, but around my wife's leg. And so I'm like, hang on a minute, you have to like shift or whatever. And another thing that my wife really wanted, other than getting on camera, was to be the first person that held that baby. She'd never had that opportunity to put the baby straight on her chest and give that baby a cuddle and build that connection. And she got to do that, which was really emotional and exciting and happy, just to watch her be able to do that. And I honestly, in about 5 minutes, 10 minutes maybe, like, all she could say is like, I did it, I can't believe it, I did it. And then she was just overwhelmed with joy that she was able to do this beautiful thing, that women have been doing for, thousands of years, but had been told that she couldn't do it and couldn't even have a child, let alone have 4 now birth, a natural birth. So that was, it was incredible to watch that, like, and very empowering too, because I'd obviously been a part of a lot of conversations with doctors and midwives, but then obviously my wife and I had many conversations about the feedback or the conversations that she had at other appointments that I couldn't attend. And then I guess, so that was beautiful. And I'll finish explaining this process. So she's cuddling the baby, and I've come around and I'm sort of like hugging her. I didn't get in the water or anything like that, but I'm hugging her from the side, and got a towel and had that around her, a cloth around the baby, and she's over the moon. And we didn't know what gender it was. We didn't book. It was just more the emotion of having the baby birth naturally. And so we probably 10 or so minutes afterwards, she tried to look and she goes, "Oh, it's a boy," and kept going. And then I'm like, "Oh, like that's great," And she goes, "Look, have a look." And we're like, "Hang on, no, it's a girl." And I didn't even get a chance to see because the light was still a little bit darker. And then she goes, "It's a girl," and I'm like, "What? Are you kidding me?" So then it was crazy to think that we had a girl after having 3 boys. So beautiful moment. And the other thing we're very open to is our 3 boys. We want them to be a part of it. So our 2 bigger boys, they sort of understand what a penis is and a vagina is, and the baby grows in the belly and comes out the vagina. So I said, I'm like, "Do you want me to go and get the boys?" Thinking like it could be a yes or a no. She goes, "Oh, in about 5 minutes, let's just take this time to ourselves." So we did that, and then I went down and got the boys and set them up a stool next to the pool, and they were sitting there. And obviously they're middle of the night, they got no idea what was going on, and sort of took a few minutes for them to realise that mum's in the pool and there's a new baby and it's a girl and they've got a new sister, and it was beautiful to see. And then they found the bowl of blueberries and strawberries. So they were pumped. They got to wake up early, meet their little sister, and mum's just had a baby, and now they're eating blueberries and strawberries. So they were
what more
wrapped.
can they want?
Exactly. So baby number 3, who was maybe 18 months old at this stage, I put him back to bed pretty quickly.
Yeah.
The other 2 boys stayed up for a little bit longer, but maybe 20, 25 minutes, and then put them back to bed. And then at this stage, my wife and I go, "Oh shit, like we haven't called anyone yet. Like we should probably call the ambulance or something." And I'm like, "Yep, I'll call our sitter first." Got her to come around, and then I called the ambulance and was on the phone to them and sort of explained the situation. So my wife's placenta was birthed about 15 minutes later after the baby, and it was all good. Everything looked fine. It was the whole process was crazy. But the bizarre thing was the ambo said that it was only him in the ambulance because there had been a large storm the night or 2 nights before, and his partner, who was meant to be on with him that night, he was trapped and couldn't get out from his house. So he was just in the ambulance by himself, and it had been a relatively cruisy night for him, he said. So he came around, done all the observations, but we couldn't leave until a second ambulance came that had the 2 responders. So that was a 50-minute wait before they could get there. So I think it was closer to 2 hours, 2.5 hours maybe after the baby was born that we were to get into an ambulance and go to the local hospital. So the first ambulance made a call and said, "Hey, this has happened. Do you mind if they come into the hospital locally, like a small hospital, and do a check over? Or would you rather them go that hour away to a large hospital?" And eventually they said, "Yeah, that's fine to come to a local one," which is really pleasing. But I should rewind a little bit. I guess the big fear I always had with the birthing process, especially with the first one, was my main. There was a few things I didn't know, but my main concern was, what's the chances of my wife dying giving birth? And the midwife sort of giggled a little bit and said, no, it's a rare, like there's a very slight opportunity that might happen, but it's very rare. I'm like, oh, thank goodness. And then my second one was, what happens if, because again, with baby number one, we're an hour away from this birth house. I said, what if we're driving and things are so fast that baby comes and we're like, or baby's on its way out and we're on the middle of the road, no one around, we can't go anywhere, can't get any help. I'm like, what would happen? And she goes, well, just make sure you pack like a bucket and towels and all that sort of stuff. But she goes, you can either call me or call the ambulance. And I guess that gave me a lot of confidence when we decided to have a home birth later on, that worse come to worse, it's no different to being at home in a warm and comfortable environment and the baby coming out and we need someone to come around and, do the work they need to do, so the ambulance or whatever, as to what it is. It's probably better than to be on the side of a road, middle of the night, who knows what the weather was doing at the time. There's nothing comfortable, there's no pain relief. Do you know what I mean? Like, so I guess that's part of the reason why I was okay with going down the home birth route.
Yeah, and also from my experience, I mean, I'm 10 minutes away from hospital, but the baby ambulance, because we called we called for the baby, she was totally fine and everything, but the baby ambulance was there within like 2 minutes, under 5 minutes. So
wow, yeah,
they sent them straight away, and then we had a similar situation where you call another ambulance and that sort of thing. But it's nice to know that they can come so quickly and that they're available. And it does change a little bit now with the COVID times, with what's happening with, less resources and that. So it's mindful to keep in touch with your local area for people listening, with COVID times and people being sick and all that. I think it's all calming down a little bit now. But yeah, it is good to know that that's there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that was another thought, that if for whatever reason baby was on its way and we're at home, we do live, within 10 minutes of a small hospital that does have an ambulance or two close by. So again, if we were halfway down to the large hospital, that's 30 minutes. And then of course you got, they could be out on other jobs and whatever, but that's still 30 minutes of travel time. So yeah, I sort of was okay with it, if that makes sense. I felt okay with it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good to hear that point of, that view as well, because I think a lot of dads especially may have that fear as well inside them and not understand or know what their options are or how safe it is as well.
Yeah, definitely. And then I guess one of the last things I think a lot of dads and even mums from the dad's perspective would probably want to know is, what was it like when we knew baby was on its way? So that last, for us, it was that last sort of 20, 30 minutes. And it was a strange, like usually it's like, holy shit, baby's on the way, what am I going to do? Like there's going to be all this blood and guts and all this sort of crazy stuff. But for me, or in my situation at least, it was almost like there was no thought about, do I need to call an ambulance now? Do I need to call sitter now because baby's on its way? Like, wow, panic. It was so bizarre. I'm not saying that would be for everyone, but for me, it was like, oh, baby's on its way. What am I going to do? I need to do this to help my wife and keep her calm. And it just, you sort of went into, it was just like a weird sort of, you just go into this mode to make sure that they're calm and you stay calm. It's a really weird experience, but there was no panic. It was almost like any thought of needing to call anyone for assistance or anything, like that was gone. It was just, right, my wife's there, she needs this, I'm going to go set up the camera over here, I'm going to put some music on, because remembering that their energy had shifted in the room, and it went from close contractions, sort of long contractions, a lot of like, I can't do this, to then just sort of almost silence to a degree. So
almost like they're calm in the storm, isn't it? The eye of the storm, it's like eerie, like everything's calmed down. What's happening? Okay, I've got my jobs to do. Got to make sure that I do all this, or I'm going to get my butt whipped if I don't get this video done.
Yeah. So it was bizarre to think about it, but at the end of the day, if I needed to call someone, I could call someone, and, because we had, I think I used my wife's phone to record the video. My phone was just nearby. So there was the two phones if we needed to call someone. But it was weird. Again, the lighting was just light enough to see. It was quite calm. There was no beeping and buzzing and people walking in and out and loud noises, and the house was silent because it was 4:30 at this stage when baby was born. It was calm. It was such a nice. It was a really, really nice experience, and I think in our situation, if we could be guaranteed to have that experience, we would have done that every time. It was such a nice experience. Obviously, at times it was a bit full on, and what are we doing? This is crazy. But hang on a minute, she's going through a contraction. So, all of that sort of doubt was out the window, and it's just be there, support them. So, yeah.
And
really
how was
nice.
it for you, kind of catching because you basically caught your daughter, didn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know. I didn't.
I want to hear how it felt compared to being on the sidelines in a surgical birth. Like, what was the kind of? Do you remember your feelings, or looking back at that memory, how you feel about it?
Yeah, it was. I feel it wasn't necessarily about catching the baby. I think I was caught up in this is incredible, seeing this so close right there, and knowing that my wife was able to do this, which I knew she could do it. And it was, I think it was more just an incredible experience. I got to catch the baby and hand the baby to my wife, and she was able to have this birth that she wanted, which is what I really wanted for her. So in terms of catching the baby,
and I don't mean the catching the baby as in, how they always say he delivered the baby, he caught the baby. It's more in the sense of like you got to have a role in this birth, and that you did this together, like you were facilitating the birth that she kind of wanted by being the person that was able to help her, get the baby onto her and be part of that journey, whereas before you would have been behind the curtain, kind of just completely out of it.
So I think being able to catch the baby and that whole baby, watching the baby come out was incredible. Hearing my wife, how excited and that almost overwhelming joy of happiness that she was able to do it. And then the one thing she wanted to always do after having a baby would be able to be the first person to hold the baby and put the baby on her chest. It was a really, really nice moment that I was able to be there to help her have and enjoy. And for me, it was not that I don't mean this in any bad way, but I didn't care if I got to hold the baby. I know that I did minimal work in terms of growing and birthing the baby. I was just there to, support her through it and be that, I guess, pillar of strength through that process. And, she got what she wanted, and, we got what we wanted. She was able to achieve something that she always wanted to achieve, which was really, really amazing. In terms of being, behind the curtain, so I felt, especially with baby number 2 and number 3, with 1, I didn't really know what was going on because we'd never experienced it before. But baby 2 and 3, I felt helpless because my wife was laying there. She's can't move. Looks like she's uncomfortable because I can only see her from her basically neck up, maybe chest up. She's got a pillow under her back to push the chest up. Her arms are out to the side. And I didn't know what she was feeling, but she was quiet every time, really quiet, almost defeated, like laying there in defeat, had nothing left. And I just remember looking at her and the feeling of being sad for what she's going through, because it's not what you want to do, especially with number 1, unnecessary in my opinion, even probably number 3 a little bit. Number 2 was almost the same, but from a baby was ill. We wanted this out hours ago, and they were waited so long. Do you know what I mean? And I guess it was hard to watch. Like, again, happy because we're going to meet our baby, but sad because the situation and the lack of being heard, and I guess pressured into these I guess the cesareans, I guess. So it was very different. But I don't know what else to say there. It was
No,
different.
I love that. It's nice to hear the different, the difference between all the births. Thank you very much for sharing your story. I really, really loved hearing your version of the story and your experience, and some extra details that we didn't hear through Sarah's experience as well. But, obviously, because you're sharing your experience. Before you go, I would love to ask, for all the partners listening today, or, listening to this episode, what would you recommend for them? What's some things and tips that you would recommend for them to get prepared emotionally? Because you had to be really supportive. Like, you were an awesome doula, supporting on the day without doula training or any other experience and that sort of thing. So I would love to hear, what sort of tips you've got for our partners listening.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first one is, I guess, trusting your partner knows what they want. Like, some people are going to want to just have a cesarean and not go through the birthing process, and that's totally okay. I feel as though, being the partner, that it does come down to what the woman wants. Yes, I guess the cesarean is easier it's an easier process, it's quickly, but if that's not what your partner wants, then don't don't pressure them into doing that. I think so. Really listening and understanding what they want, and then, knowing the stuff that they like. What sort of area, like, are they a calmer person? Are they a more intense person? And really get an understanding of what they want, but also just research it. Like, I feel like there's probably a lot of partners out there that don't care. Don't care is too strong of a sentence, but I guess I'll just, have the baby, sort of. Do you know what I mean? Like, just whatever happens type. But it's not like that. I think the women, that they've gone through such a large change, conceiving the baby, growing the baby, and then laboring and birthing the baby, that the least we can do as a especially from a male perspective, the least we can do is be there and know what they want, and offer them that support. If you laugh through it, then that's great. If you need to sort of bite your tongue and just cop all of the maybe not abuse, but just cop everything on, like, as a grain of salt, and be there and just support them. Because for me, sometimes it was just me touching my wife's hands or squeezing her hands and not even talking, and other times it was telling her that she can do this and this is what she wanted. And especially the birthing process, that it's all a process. Women can do this, and they have done this for many, many years. And I guess probably listening to some of the Ria's work is just knowing the stages of labor, and understanding what the women want, what the partner wants, what the women wants, and how you can best support them for what they want. Because there's certainly a lot of times when it does get challenging and hard, it's very easy to just go, let's just go to the hospital and get it over and done with. But you need to know, is that what your partner really, really wants, or do they want to have a natural birth, or a hospital birth? And everyone's going to be different. People are going to want to have someone else there. I can understand a lot of people probably don't want to be that sole person to be responsible for, because if something went wrong, I would probably feel guilty in a way too, because we should have just went to the hospital, if you know what I mean, like that thought. But at the same time, if something goes wrong, it was probably always going to go wrong, whether that was at home, on the way to the hospital, or at the hospital, or in another setting.
And also at the same time, I feel like taking the responsibility rather than putting blame on somebody else, it doesn't at the end of the day, that's not going to make it feel any better, because you're still going to blame yourself for trusting that person. So you're only kind of tricking yourself thinking that you're going to get out of some of the pain of taking that full radical responsibility of what happens, you know. Because I know myself, and you probably experience it, you know, there's that blame of that midwife and that obstetrician, and, you know, of course people do things, but ultimately when we are taking full responsibility, we can say no, or we can, we're still in control, like slightly, but, you know, obviously our choices diminish based on where we are and who's influencing us, and, you know, what restrictions we've got.
Absolutely. So I think if it goes down the hospital route, it comes down to knowing what your partner wants. Like, if it comes down the hospital route, you need to be prepared that they are going to, I guess, twist your arm and tell you what you want to hear until these crises of confidence happens, when you're vulnerable and your partner's vulnerable, and it's the easy option is just book that cesarean.
Yeah.
Because, you know, that's probably happened to us a couple of times with a couple of our first children, but, you know, are they necessary? Not always. Can the wife do it? Can the partner do it? Absolutely they can, but they need to be supported from their partner, but also from the people around them, whether that's private midwife, whether that's the midwives in the hospital system, or anyone else. But yeah, I guess for the partner's perspective, just know what the lady wants. She will know what she wants, and if she's unsure, then sort of discuss it. Be prepared and show that you really care, or that you actually give a shit, if I could say that.
Yeah.
Whether that's, you know, searching online, some articles, or watching some birthing videos, and all this stuff is out there. It's all free. It's everywhere, you know, the podcasts and things like that. I guess from the woman's perspective, you know, if you listen, my wife listened to podcasts and birthing stories, you know, for many years. So it was easy for her just to send me the link of a podcast and say, hey, listen to this. And from the partner's perspective, just do it. Show that you care. And if you don't really care, then be honest with the woman that's going through the birthing process, so that she can find someone who does care. I think that's probably a couple of big key.
I love that. Yeah, I think that's really important. If you don't have the capacity, some people don't have the capacity. They might be working a lot. They may not have the emotional ability to, you know, make that happen in the next 9 months or whatever. Being honest and allowing that woman to go find somebody who she can pay to come in and step in as that support person, rather than kind of dismissing and saying, you know, making it sound like she's been a bit over dramatic and she doesn't need it and whatever, because they're not willing to kind of step in that place, kind of thing. And not everyone should either, because if you feel really fearful and you're not willing to do the research and the emotional growth and all that sort of thing, because you explained a very, very challenging situation, and not all births are like that either, Ben. Like,
absolutely.
Like, you might have another birth together and it might be like a completely different experience. It's just, that was the experience that you two had together. And I love it because it was so powerful and it was so challenging in the emotional aspect, and, you know, what Sarah went through, but also what you went through. And then you know, had the outcome that you both wanted to have, which is so powerful at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so actually the last thing I probably wanted to touch on there was, from my perspective anyway, that the woman has been able to conceive and grow a baby and go through the labouring process, and the least that I could have done was to be there and know what my wife wanted and be her biggest supporter and advocate while she's going through and delivering something that we wanted together. And I think I feel like that's probably one of the biggest things, is we decided we want to have a child, or the second child, or the fourth child, whatever it may be. Is the least I can do is play my 2 minutes in this process to achieve what she wanted to achieve, and not dismiss it, or, you know, not care too much about how she gives that, or how she births that baby, and how she welcomes the baby. So, you know, care, or at least be willing to care enough to say that you don't want to be that support person.
I think it's important to have that open communication as well in a partnership. And this is something I talk about in my workshop on how you can get your partner to support you more, is that I mean, you're having babies together majority of the time. Most women that are listening to podcasts, I'm assuming, having babies with partners, long-term partners, and you've already had a baby with that person most of the time, because you've had a cesarean. This is the VBAC podcast, so you want to continue that partnership role, and so you don't want to break down the barriers of the relationship or disrespect each other or leave it open where that person feels like they are alone, because that festers resentment on both sides, so it's really important to have that conversation before you fall pregnant. But if that ship sailed and you're already pregnant right now, there needs to be a lot of ongoing support and conversation openness, and really trying to get on the same side. And then either I can't do this and you need to get a doula to support us both, because doulas can support both the man and the woman through, and the children, through that experience, or have someone like me who's can do one-on-one sessions and get that emotional support ticking over, or just actually say, I'm going to take more ownership and I'm going to start doing some research and come up with you and do this together, and get to a place where I feel confident that we can do this together.
Yeah, absolutely. And it probably extends to women who aren't with their partner, and they're essentially going through this pregnancy by themselves, or maybe with a small group of friends or family members. But if they decide that they want the father, or who the father of the child is, on that, to be with them and support them, because if that father is going to be hands-on, and especially if the woman wants them to be, then again, show that you care. Because I think if you don't care throughout that pregnancy process and even that birthing process, then that might translate into what they're going to be like after the baby is born, and into the future. So show that you care. The women,
I love that.
The women have got it bloody challenging to make sure they're, or not make sure, but conceive at the right time of the month, and then make sure they're doing all the right things, whether it's eating food or exercising, or not exercising, or there's so much for the women to have to do, and there's so much information out there that they should be doing this and should be doing that, but they can't actually do this or that. So they've got a hell of a journey over that 9 or so months to grow this baby, and then that final hurdle is going through the labor. So
the final hurdle, and then the real journey starts. Hey, Ben, when you've got the child, and then that's where the real hardship really starts, the challenge of parenting. But I suppose, like, if they're not they're separated as well, I think, like, if you want to work together, I think it is working together is the easiest path, you know what I mean? Like, if you can work together and support each other, even in little ways, like how much easier is life when you're working together. It might mean you just, like you said, you touch their hand, or say those affirmation words and that, and it just makes life so much easier. But I appreciate you jumping on to say that last little part for us, because we stopped recording and you've come back on. Thank you so much for sharing your story and for being our first dad on the podcast. I really, really appreciate you taking the time and sharing, and your rawness and your truth.
No problems at all. It's been a pleasure to be on the podcast.
Thank you.
No problems. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the VBAC Home Birth Stories podcast. I hope that this episode has helped you take another step to finding your voice and confidence in your VBAC home birth journey. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a second to rate and review. Each review helps us to help more women to find out more about VBAC home birth, just like you. Don't forget to take a screenshot, share it to your Instagram stories, and tag me at the Motherhood Circle. I'll see you next time.